especially for new treatments. We had already several patients here from Ukraine and from Russia when the war started. And in fact, Ukrainian families were not a problem. They stayed with us, no problem. But Russian families started to have financial problems to survive in Barcelona. So they, as soon as they finished their treatments, they asked to go very quickly and give back deposits in cash so that they would be able to fly back to Russia. Our hospital, as a European hospital, is belonging to the net of hospitals who is giving free service to all the Ukrainian refugees. So we have been receiving by the public system several families, but this has not stopped the requests of private treatments in our hospital that we are dealing very delicately with helping them to find financial help in foundations. And in this way, we are still receiving some quite a little amount of families that are still coming to our hospital, financed by foundations around Europe. Okay, so we are afraid that this is going to affect us very seriously, especially from Russian market. But Ukrainian families will keep on coming in a lower quantity, of course, but they are still coming to our hospital privately too. This is the situation here in Spain.
Thank you. Dr. Sinan, can we hear from you next? You need to click unmute.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for organizing this event. It's quite important topic. As we have started recently receiving patients from Russia and Ukraine, we were very focused on this region. Specifically, we just started our especially digital marketing activities right at the time when the pandemic has started. After that, we have also started to receive patients. And these were, interestingly, patients who were seeking for tertiary treatments like oncology, bone marrow, liver transplants, rather than simple hair transplant or aesthetic surgeries, which are very popular at the moment in Turkey. This also was very promising from our side. It was a new market for us because Turkey was known as a sunset fun destination among Russians and former Russian countries. But this time, Russians and Ukrainians were seeking healthcare services, quality healthcare services in our country. Formerly, they were used to go to either Germany, Christian probably will tell about it more in detail, or Israel, because many Russian doctors are connected with their counterparts in Israel. When the war started, we fortunately didn't have patients, inpatient guests at our facilities. There are several issues right now. There are leads who wish to come, but because of the sanctions, there are certain logistics and financial issues. They can't transfer financial resources. They can't even organize their travels to Turkey. Russians, in a way, can achieve it because Turkish Airlines and Red Wings, they still continue their flights. But Ukrainians, they come overpassing the border to another country and then flying to Istanbul or driving by car to Istanbul. You mentioned about some patient stories. It's interesting that we have 3 ladies who are supposed to have deliveries at our hospital from Ukraine. So one of them is about, but 2 are pending and waiting for the right time. They have brought the resources cash with them, as they are not very expensive, such procedures. They can afford it, but if it is about organ transplantation, for example, they really suffer for providing the resources. At the moment, I would like to stop here, and then I will continue in the later cycles.
Thank you, Dr. Sinan. And Christian, can we hear what you're seeing on the ground in Germany?
For sure, thank you very much. Well, to give you a historic picture of our organization, we used to treat approximately 2,000 patients from all over the globe. And traditionally, in the past 20 years, half of them were actually from Russian-speaking countries or the countries of the former Soviet Union, so the CIS. Now, of course, there is barely any Russian-speaking patients. So from Russia, definitely it's limited completely due to the multitude of the, let's say, restrictions. One of them, of course, is the sanctions, travel restrictions, the issues with the finances, and also what we see in Germany is hospitals outright refusing to treat any Russian patients, which is a very, I would say, critical issue, because these are often patients grabbed out of the middle of society who used to come to Germany regularly for either their checkups, but also serious cases, pediatric cases. And of course, these hospitals seem to have their reasoning, but we have seen 2, let's say, popular cases in Germany. One of a university hospital that has just outright refused to treat Russian patients. They later issued a statement and trying to retract it to a certain degree. But you have the sentiment amongst many of the hospitals that they will not treat Russian patients even if they need the treatment. So some of them have just completely shut down their Russian operations in order to avoid any kinds of conflicts. And this is a topic I will comment on later to a certain extent. For Ukrainian patients, you have the medical tourism has also gone down. It has been reduced, but hospitals are very open to treat refugees from the war, or even offer to them the medical services they would have had in their country if they had needed it, and that they, of course, now cannot make use of anymore. Regarding patient stories, often on my desk, I get these cases where there is actual issues. So this might pertain to Russian patients or Ukrainian patients. And I have one story of a patient who was scheduled to have heart surgery in a German hospital that refused to treat him. And they basically canceled this heart surgery. It's for him, it's an essential surgery. So it's not something he's doing out of any kind of well, it's not a cosmetic case. I mean, heart surgery nearly ever is or never is. And now we are trying to find treatment for this patient. So to shed some light on this case, this is not a politically exposed person. This is not somebody with any links to the government in Russia that would, for some people, justify this cause of action. And this is a patient who's basically stuck in limbo now. He has the financial resources because he has financial resources outside of Russia, but the hospital just canceled his treatment last minute. He was already in country. And so we are currently trying to help him with some of our partner hospitals to find treatment to get this over with, and then he can go his merry way. But this is what we see, what I hear from our partner hospitals, that many treatments are being canceled and there's patients. And I think this is the best way to put it, is they are stuck in limbo. They cannot, some of them cannot go back easily. Some of them have issues in continuing treatment they have started. So it's a difficult situation at the moment.
Thank you very much, Christian. And last but not least, Talip, if you would, please.
Hello, everyone. And I would like to first thank Irving and Elizabeth for organizing this event. It's a pleasure for us to be participating. And just like the rest of the panelists, of course, it has affected our hospitals, business with Ukraine and Russia negatively. I mean, Ukraine has been a major market for us for several years, especially for patients coming for serious illnesses like bone marrow transplant, oncology treatments, radiation oncology treatments, and serious neurosurgery cases. And even when the conflict started, we had patients here, and some of them are still here, and they couldn't go back. And from Ukraine, we have been admitting patients from both from governmental institutions and individual patients. And now they are having some difficulties in funding these patients, and it's not easy for them to go on their treatments. That's why, of course, affected negatively. And just for one instance, one patient we were planning to admit just when the conflict started. Patient couldn't come. The patient needed bone marrow transplant, so we had to arrange a flight for the patient from Romania to Istanbul. I mean, the patient barely made it. It was such a difficult journey for them. But because of the sanctions, as the other panelists mentioned, it's now very hard for patients to pay for the treatment services they receive here. And the thing is, the current patients we have here, now they cannot go back. And we are hosting them, of course. We have our guest houses here because we admit more than 35,000 patients from all over the world in a year. So, but we don't know how long will it continue like this. So it's such a bad situation at the moment. And I believe that's all for the moment, and I'll continue the next questions.
Thank you very much to all of you. Obviously, we're starting to hear some common themes already, that patients are not unexpectedly being stranded where they are, challenges with returning, challenges with accessing care in their intended destination, or possibly being diverted. And of course, particularly for Russians, getting access to any kind of currencies that are being accepted. So I think that leads into your next question, Irving.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, there are several common themes here, and one of them has to do with finances. So I'd like to change up the order a little bit and ask Talip and then the other panelists, how are the finances being handled now? And what models do you see emerging? So we've got three classes of consumers, right? We've got the Russians and their challenges because the financial system has basically excised Russian payment systems. So the first is the Russians, the second are the Ukrainians, and then everyone else. So what financial models do you see emerging to help deal with those medical travelers who are caught in this crisis?
So as you have just mentioned, we have two models here. The first one, patients are paying out of their own pocket, I mean, individually, and the second model, the governments or funds financing for them. If we speak for the Ukrainians, the second option, the funds or the government will not be able to fund any treatment, but they have to pay for themselves. And for the moment, or before, we have admitted patients from Russia, and now the numbers are increasing because people are leaving the country, even for receiving a vaccination for COVID-19. They are coming to Turkey, and we have received several patients in the previous weeks. And of course, they are paying by themselves, but for some serious treatments, it will not be possible for them to carry the amount of money they need for the treatment. So as far as we see, the cryptocurrency will be an option for the patients to transfer the money, but I don't know if it is applicable for the economics of the countries, or it's allowed by the countries exactly. there are some other options like the local transfer systems of Russia, where some of the Turkish banks have agreement with or had agreement with before, and I believe their names are like MIR, M-I-R, and a second option is the one that the Chinese are using, the Union Pay. The Russian banks have agreement with Union Pay, and two or three banks in Turkey have agreement with Union Pay as well. So that could be a model of paying for the treatment of patients because it's urgent and it needs to be paid anyhow. So thank you.
Thank you, Talip. Christian, what are you saying? What can you envision with regards to payment models?
Well, what we are seeing is that facilitators are starting to take a more of an active role again in payment transfers. This actually has changed over the past when banks where hospitals try to centralize all these services by themselves, which I do understand and I support to the most extent, because of course they want to make sure there's no interference by any intermediaries. But of course, facilitators have far more flexibility in how they operate their businesses. They can just easily register on any kind of payment transfer platform, and by this adapt to the patients. So this is one of the options. What's also happening with most Russian patients is they will go back to cash payments at the moment, and they run, of course, into the AML, anti-money laundering issue, because most German hospitals, and I think I speak for most of Europe or the entire world, are now trying to step away from cash payments, and hospitals are still trying to reopen this pipeline for those patients who come who have certain kinds of urgent and larger surgeries, which of course are very financially demanding. And it is sometimes a weird picture to see patients pay up to the 10s, 15, 100,000 euros in cash, but hospitals have to adapt if they want to continue to provide treatment, because there's no other options for these patients. What Talip mentioned regarding crypto, I think is a very interesting thought. For now, I cannot envision it happening, at least in Germany, because hospitals do not have the knowledge by any means to deal with cryptocurrency. And until this is set up, and we have seen how much time general modes of digitalization have taken, and for hospitals to step into the crypto market, so to speak, or offer this as a payment solution, I don't think this is going to be caused by this. Of course, in the let's like long term, 5 to 10 years, I can envision it, but for now, I think the only thing that is going to remain is at some point to have the facilitators stay with their more active role, offer diverse payment methods to the patients, especially from Russia, and then we have to see how it develops. It's very hard to make any kind of prediction on this from my end.
Very interesting, Christian. Thank you. We can certainly have a conversation about dragging hospitals into the crypto domain, digital currency. Dr. Sinan, your observations about this? You're muted, Dr. Sinan.
Okay. My experience is pretty much similar to Talip's experience. Our patients, in such instances, we realize how creative a human being can be. So, as I have mentioned to you, Turkey was known for fancy and fun, and they used to pay their trips by Mircard or Union Pay. So we are thinking about topping up the Mircard and spending the money by using this card at healthcare facilities. This is the most probable option. The second one, this is very interesting. In Turkey, there is a huge trend for real estate developments. Many people from the region are buying flats or houses and get Turkish passport in return. So our Russian guests also started to shift their resources from the EU zone to Turkey in order to keep their financial capabilities in a safe zone in case of a sanction will be put into the sea. So active transfer of such resources, financial resources, will also enable us to provide them healthcare services in the future.
Interesting observation about human creativity, Dr. Sinan.
Yeah.
And I suppose if people have an asset in the destination where they're traveling for care, they can somehow leverage that asset. They can liquidate a portion of it or borrow against it for medical care. And Patricia, what are you seeing with regards to financing care of the children at Saint Jean de Deo?
Our experience is not so wide. We, in fact, about our Russian patients, in fact, have stopped transferring or coming or whatever. So we do not have any experience. We know that they can do transfer. They can transfer money through union through this system in China, but in fact we have not received anything through this system. And there's another problem that Russian benefactors that were some of the most important agents that used to facilitate the arrival of these patients to our country have completely disappeared from somewhere. They are somewhere, but we don't have anything now. And Ukrainian patients do have easily. They obtain funds from the foundations that are paying for them, and they obtain funds from European people or people around the world that are able to transfer to these foundations. So the transfer to our hospital later, it's very easy, and this is the only way we can receive money from them, and they can pay their treatments. I assume that the thing is that as we are attending children, maybe foundations can obtain more easier way funds from donations now. But of course, we are attending Russian children and also Ukrainian children. We do not make a difference.
Yes, that's a very interesting observation about the humanitarian perspective of foundations. And I wonder if everyone is talking about how the clinical category of individuals who are seeking care or getting stranded, these are people who are very sick. And I'm wondering if other types of foundations or charitable organizations might emerge as a way of providing some of this funding, perhaps in specific clinical categories. Really interesting. And I think Elizabeth is going to field the next set of questions.
Just a follow-on question to the discussion about finances and how it interacts with patient care, because for these patients who are now stranded in one destination or another, it has to interfere with their treatment plans. If they can't return home for their post-discharge care for one reason or another, or for Ukrainians, if they simply are afraid to return or can't return, first of all, how does the situation impact patient care and the delivery of patient care? And second of all, how financially what role do hospitals or healthcare providers or facilitators play in now helping these patients and their families, if they're children and families, now start to cover costs outside of medical care, their housing, food, and other things that they will need for some period of time? So Patricia, would you like to start with that, please?
Well, yes. Well, in Spain, as far as you know, we have a social security system, and also our government has applied a law to all these refugees, so they are allowed to obtain their residence permission and also their working permission immediately as far as they arrive to Spain. So these families are also attended by social security services that are working to give them a shelter and food and whatever they may need, of course, and also education for the kids. So they are immediately admitted to a public school in Spain. So they are all their needs are covered by our social security system. This is not something that is helping our business, of course, no. But there's an emergency situation. So from now, and in a period for 1 or 2 years, Spain is going to, I don't know the word in English, they are going to acoger, they are going to admit all these families here in Spain, and they are going to legalize their situation immediately as soon as they arrive to our airports or the train stations or they cross our borders. I think all Europe is acting almost the same. So for them, it's very easy to pass from one system to the other. So if for the families that were here already when the war started, they know they are going to receive a free flat and a free way of buying food and so on, and the kids are going to go to school. So we are trying to help these families. For them, I think it's easy. Not for the Russian families, but of course, if the kids are being attended in our hospital, they are going to be attended as well as any other Ukrainian kid.
Thank you. Dr. Sinan, would you like to reply?
Turkey's position is different than Spain's or Germany's. We already have received 5 million refugees from Syria who are being covered, supported by the government. So I would also prefer to get refugees from Russia or Ukraine, but the capacities are overloaded in Turkey in this respect. So Turkey won't be able to assist in this respect. The private healthcare sector will continue to provide fee-for-service out of the pocket services for such patients. So I would like to add one of my interesting observations. Families try to overcome this sanctions by traveling the whole family. So if a patient who requires a liver transplantation, for example, for let's say $70,000 US, 7 members of the family, each being allowed to carry $10,000, accompany the patient in order to provide the necessary finances. This is also one of our interesting observations. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, people are unlimitedly creative, especially in these challenging situations. Christian, from the perspective of the facilitator, are you being called on to do, you mentioned providers turning to facilitators for financial creativity. Are you also being called on in additional ways, new ways that perhaps weren't part of your traditional role?
Rarely ever. It hasn't occurred yet, and I don't think it will. The same goes actually for the hospitals. The hospitals stick to their lane. They continue to provide medical services. when they can. And we have the similar situation, or basically a mirrored situation to what Patricia has mentioned. It's that Germany has offered the Ukrainian refugees to come to Germany to get a work permit for up to 3 years, to have residency. They were being provided an access to social services, which of course includes accommodation and schooling, whatever they need. So these patients will then of course have access to the German healthcare system as socially or statutory insured patients, which is a change for these hospitals. But I have not yet seen anybody complain about this. Facilitators in Germany, medical tourism facilitators they are really specialized in providing either medical services or assisting in the provision of medical services, or in general business purposes. So there's many patients approaching facilitators for investment advice, finding real estate similar to the situation in Turkey, but nobody is really approaching facilitators with the idea in mind to have them in any way involved in the process. We have offered to hospitals to provide our skills in medical tourism management and consulting to provide pipelines to these patients, although the need is very, very limited. As I have mentioned before, they are basically admitted as statutory insured patients. So there is no need for any kind of certain other pipeline, and they are just basically following their daily operations.
Very good. Thank you so much. Talip, your comments?
I totally agree with Dr. Sinan, and if this is about the refugees, I believe it will be more about the governmental hospitals that we have in Turkey. They have been serving refugees from different post-war countries, so it will be related to them. And mainly when Turkey receives refugees from a post-war country, they provide temporary identification cards for them. And if the private hospitals are affiliated with the national insurance system already, then those patients can have medical treatments done in private hospitals as well, just like the Turkish citizens. So I believe it is more about the government hospitals, but as Dr. Sinan mentioned, the private hospitals will be serving for patients paying out of their pockets, I believe.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much. And Irving?
Well, to create a round robin, so we've got quite a few questions from the participants, but the final round from the panelists would be around your informed best guesses about how this is going to play out over time. What will be the impacts, the consequences, the intermediate and long-term changes that you expect to see in the cross-border trade in medical services in particular? What do you see as you look even just around the corner and down the timeline a ways? Talip, would you take that first, please?
Sure. Thank you. So I believe this will be a definite drawback for the sector of medical tourism. I mean, people having treatment overseas, and at least even though everything settles down very soon, at least it will be, I believe, 10 years for everything to reach to the same level as it was. And on behalf of our hospital, we were planning several investments in Ukraine and Russia as well, but we stopped all of them because we couldn't take the risk. We couldn't foresee what the situation will become. And in my personal opinion, people from Russia will be coming to Turkey more and more because it's close. And as Dr. Sinan mentioned, there are options of living in Turkey by buying a residence, a flat, and getting a residence permit, even a citizenship. So people will be coming from Russia to Turkey easily and more. And also Ukrainian people, I believe there are more than 2 million Ukrainians living in Russia. So they are somehow trying to get out of the country. So they have Turkey as an option, of course, as a close country. So that's why I think even though we will receive more patients from those countries, it will be hard to invest and broaden the strategy of our marketing activities in those countries, in both of them.
Fascinating, fascinating perspective. Christian?
Well, I think we are at a pivot now. The thing is, we have the situation that first of all we have uncertainty. Uncertainty usually is the death to every market, and especially in the healthcare industry, I think, or in the medical tourism, international healthcare industry, we have the situation that patients do not know will they receive treatment similar to what we have seen in the COVID pandemic, but I would say on a level that is far more relevant to our society, to any one of us. And what really bothers me is hospitals refusing to treat patients based on their nationality, because this usually always impacts the wrong patient. And I'm not going to say that's a wrong or a right patient, but to put it in a more simplistic way, we have seen throughout every crisis. There have been sanctions imposed on Russia 10 or 15 years ago. I do not remember exactly when it was, but what we have seen is that certain patients, affluent patients, those who are politically exposed, can actually still access the country. They will still receive medical treatment because they have outside funds. So, and then on the other hand, you have patients impacted who have no connection to any government, who have basically just gone or lived their life in Russia, and they came to Germany to receive medical treatment, and then there was an obstacle for them they could not overcome. So the situation I see is, and this could then, for the future, could be basically ported to every other nation or nationality. If there is another conflict in the world, patients must then be afraid that they will not receive necessary medical treatment in a country. And I really, at this time and in general, I do not really want to speak and care about the political perspective. I really care about the human perspective here, and this is what you set this meeting up for, and this is why I was happy to join it. And this is something that is not being discussed a lot in general, and I'm glad we are doing it now, because it's patients suffering, patients who have not taken any part in this conflict, who often are I would not say apolitical, but they just want to care for their health, for their family's health. In Patricia's case, it's pediatric cases, so children. And for the future, I think there will be uncertainty in the market. Patients not knowing if there's going to be sanctions imposed. Are these sanctions impacting their medical travel? What I hope to see is a bit of a draft or a bit of a shift to telemedicine, because it's a tool that helps in crossing borders. Often medical treatment can be provided through telemedicine. It can be rehabilitation cases or other cases, or even just to reaffirm a diagnosis and then get the adequate treatment. So I think this is actually a trend we are going, or I think it's going to become a trend far more than it is now. But for the future of the medical tourism market, what's happening now, the conflict is really I think everybody has a responsibility to take part in finding solutions for this, because the uncertainty is not going to help any of us, at least the patients, or they're going to be the last ones served.
There was certainly uncertainty, Christian, and you and I have talked about this with regards to the contagion effect during the COVID epidemic. And now we've reached another type of uncertainty, and it's fascinating to think, I'm sorry to sound so academic about this, because it isn't subjectively, it's frightening, but it is fascinating from a patient flow point of view to consider how that's going to be handled. Dr. Sinan?
Yes. So during these hard times, we have learned how vulnerable medical tourism in fact is. So you just focus on a project, you spend your time and resources, reach a certain point, but all of a sudden somebody decides to hit somebody, and all the project is being ruined at once. This we have faced several years ago when Turkey had the Russian airplane. I had just signed an MOU with a Russian healthcare hospital group, and then this happened and the project was cancelled. So as takeaway notes, I would recommend to all of my colleagues who are involved with medical tourism to distribute the risk and not to carry all the eggs in the same basket.
We haven't talked about risk, but really overtly, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about what are the risks for these markets as we move forward with regards to this this terrible war. Well, I think that brings up Patricia.
Well, I do really agree with my colleague, Dr. Sinan. I, of course, have worked a lot in this project, and suddenly in one day, everything changes, and it's quite confusing and it's quite frustrating too. From one day to the other, especially here in Spain, in my hospital, our patients turn to be social security patients, so we have to change our mind and say, no, this is not an international patient, it becomes one of our patients, our normal patients. No? This is quite difficult to deal with, and I really think that depending on the length of this problem, we're going to have one or other one or other situation. I mean, if this conflict lasts for months or just 1 year or something, maybe we can be back at a certain normality, because I guess that Russian market it's going to come again to Spain, to Germany, to Turkey, to everywhere, in depending on how long do we last in rising the limitations, the financial limitations to Russia. But if this conflict solves in 1 year or two, maybe we can have a certain normality with Russian market. Of course, here in Spain, we are working with markets, with other markets that are very, very close to us, like South America. It was a very big market. It was a hard market with no funds, but we are trying to look for solutions, like using foundations with these markets too, and helping them to raise funds to come to our hospital, because they are very close to us. And this is giving some fruits in these 2-3 weeks. And we are going to keep on working in this way. Of course, teleconsultation is being very, very important. Now we are very mature, we are very used to these devices and etc. So now we are using them to make health controls or make first evaluation or diagnosis with Russian patients or patients around the world. So this is going to help a lot. And well, I'm very, very, I do agree with Dr. Sinan that the message is to have the eggs, not the eggs, all the eggs in the same basket. This is the best message for me too. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Some of the observations are extremely important for those who are currently in these markets and those who are thinking about being in these markets, or those who were out of the markets because of the pandemic and were thinking about getting back into the markets because the effects of the pandemic seem to be waning, and then this occurred. One of the questions, of course, that come into my mind is the impact of the loss of the infrastructure in Ukraine. The systems, the capacity, the physical capacity, the loss of that infrastructure is going to have an enormous regional impact. Ukraine, big parts of Ukraine are already wrecked. And how we as a people respond, how we, as Dr. Sinan, I think, said, the creativity, how we apply some of that creativity is going to be really important. I think Elizabeth has lined up some questions from our audience.
Yes, I have. Thank you, Irving. Thank you to all of our panelists so far. in listening to your stories and your experience, it's clear that just as with COVID, which has been a horrible experience, and I know that we're not done yet, but hopefully the worst is behind us, that there were lessons learned that have been applied in healthcare and I think in people's lives in general. And I do believe that the same will come from this crisis. You've already mentioned some of them. Of course, the increased delivery of telehealth services that was already accelerated by COVID. And now I think this crisis is again reinforcing that that is the way forward, and we need to move even quicker than we have been in that direction. Changing roles of facilitators. Kristen, I think it would be fascinating to talk with you more about how you've been challenged during this situation. The use of cryptocurrency, Dr. Sinan, yes, I couldn't agree more that it's going to take hospitals a long time. I do believe most hospitals will have great difficulty in accepting and moving towards cryptocurrency. But as usual, healthcare is behind what consumers want. Thank you. And I do have some questions here from our panelists. There's one question. Is there any knowledge from the panelists on situations involving Ukraine surrogate women who are currently pregnant? I know this story was widely reported in the news media in the US. I don't know if any of you have firsthand experience or knowledge of working with Ukrainian surrogate mothers. No, no, I think maybe that question's a bit too specific.
Nobody wants to touch that.
Although if I might add one quick thing, without having any experience on this topic itself, usually to find help in these cases, there's a lot of charitable organizations and organizations devoted to niches in healthcare. We have the same with rare diseases. You will usually find foundations, organizations who bring people together and who can consult on these topics and how to approach them. In broad healthcare, you have them, but of course, they are very loaded and they are outcapacitated. But in niches such as this one in fertility, there's usually a lot of organizations to approach if somebody needs help. This would be one access point.
Surrogacy is an important topic and probably one that we could have spent more time talking about, in as much as it's I don't know if it's a major, but it's certainly an important part of the healthcare system in Ukraine. Do you have another question, Elizabeth? Because I've got one here that's pretty good.
Go ahead, Irving.
So this question could have us go off the rails into ethics, but I don't think we can talk about this without addressing some ethical issues. Each of us in one way or another has done that. Let's assume a Russian patient can find a way to pay for treatment. What is the reputational risk to your hospital of accepting Russian patients? And I will let the Turkish providers answer first, then I'm going to ask Patricia, and then we'll hear from Christian.
So I can openly tell you that the Turkish hospitals are totally apolitical, and they are very sensitive to cultural or religious differences. So I can tell you very freely and happily that we can accept both Ukrainian and Russian patients at the same time and host them at the same ward if they don't fight. Because we had this with Iraqi patients. There are two sects of religion, Shia and Sunni. They were hosted in the same ward, and we have realized that we're about to fight with each other.
They must have been recovering quickly.
Yes, yes.
Talip?
I definitely agree with Dr. Sinan, and Turkey has gained a lot of experience in serving for post-war patients or injured patients in the war. And we have served for everyone, and I believe they will not stop providing medical services because of any political side of this conflict, or because it's just the matter is health, and if the patient needs it, definitely we will be serving it, providing that service, whether they are paying or not, whether it will be provided in a governmental hospital or in a private hospital. And but I totally agree. We will be serving it, being in a neutral position, I believe.
Patricia, your thoughts?
Hi. Well, I have an easier answer because, of course, we only receive kids. So for us, it's easier to maintain our hospital apart from politics. And we are receiving now. We are not receiving Russian patients, but if we could, we will also receive Russian and Ukrainian patients. No problem.
That Christian, you had some very direct things to say about this. Do you remember the question?
I do remember the question. First of all, I don't think reputational damages or reputational issues should be on the forefront of hospital thinking. Of course it is, because if it boils down to it, the hospital is still a business and has to be to a certain extent operated like one. Now in Germany, what we have seen, there is actually, and I cannot speak for the entire population, but from the cases we have seen where hospitals refused to treat all Russian patients, first there was an outcry, and then it was basically clarified it's about medical tourism. And this is where I see the bigger issue, because suddenly the sentiment changed, and these, let's say, actions of them actually gained favor, at least if you follow certain commentaries on the internet, on newspapers or social media, which I find very concerning, because it speaks to a general lack of the population when it comes to the education about and the knowledge about medical tourism, because many of them still have this antiquated thought that every international patient who comes to Germany is actually a rich, affluent, either oligarch or sheikh from the Middle East. And this is not the case. Most of these patients are people as you and I and all of us, and they have the only thing they have in mind, as some of us go to Turkey or Spain or other places, Germany for leisure and travel, they come here for medical treatment. And I think this is the issue we see. So I think there should be reputational damage for not accepting patients, because it's what doctors are supposed to do.
Good.
Unfortunately, the reality shows us something else.
Good answer. So Elizabeth, were there other questions here? We're down to one or two last ones. One last one.
Yes, I think we have time perhaps for one more question. This is for our Turkish panelists. What was the number of Ukrainians coming to Turkey prior to the war, and what is it now? And the second half of that question is, has any Ukrainian sought refuge in Turkey?
So the
Sinan?
questions are addressed to me. Before the war, it was about 1,000 Russians and another 1,000 Ukrainians who received treatments at our facilities in Istanbul. About Ukrainian sought refugee in Turkey, I haven't heard any about such a refugee in Turkey. Talip, did you?
No, I haven't heard either, and the numbers are almost similar. But of course, now it ceased to be people cease to be coming because they cannot come. So we cannot guess the numbers at the moment. But I can definitely say the numbers are increasing for the Russian citizens.
In the beginning of my speech, I told about 2 pregnant ladies from Ukraine. So at the moment, I can tell that we have 3 patients from Ukraine.
Very good. Well, I think we are out of time, and I would like to thank all of our panelists. You've been terrific for sharing your experiences, your knowledge, your information, and a look in your crystal ball to see what we might expect in the future. So thank you very, very much. And thank you to all of our participants who've listened in, and I can see that comments are coming in that our panelists are being thanked as well. So I wish everyone well, stay healthy, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.